Cinema Classics is produced by John DeSando and sponsored by WCBE 90.5 FM. Read reviews and listen to shows online at wcbe.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Mary Yerina.
And this is Cinema Classics. Now, Mary, tough time of year for good movies. Whoa, really tough. As you know, this next week we're going to be doing Cocaine Bear. This week we have Cocaine Bear, which is going pretty low.
There's a reason that films are released at this time of year. It's post-award nominations and pre-next round of contenders.
It's for sure, yeah. And you're always suspicious about anybody who releases a film at this time of year. I say they're just trying to provide their contractual obligation, and other than that, no. But from my point of view, I was saved by and saved by Emily, which is the movie that we're doing this week. This kind of movie is just made for me.
It's the Regency era films, of which there never seems to be a lack of at some point in the cinemas.
And in this case, it's not Emily Dickinson. Let's get that straight now.
No, it is not. It's Emily Bronte, one of the three very famous Bronte sisters from the 19th century.
And you know, and I say that because, of course, Emily Dickinson has some similar traits to our Emily here. Introspective, shy, may never have had an affair, although it was suggested that some visitor to Emily Dickinson's house she had been involved with, but difficult to know.
Yes.
As it is with Emily Bronte.
Yes, there's very little known about Emily Bronte. Most of the perspective and history, other than her one novel, Wuthering Heights, which is a classic by standards today, most of what we know about her is what her more famous and more published sister, Charlotte Bronte, shared at the time of her life with her biographer. So we don't have a lot to go on other than she was extremely shy to the point of being an introvert and almost having a phobia about being out beyond her normal environment.
Yeah.
And she was an animal lover. But the lack of information about her, I think, is what led Frances O'Connor, who is an actress that many of you may recognize from AI.
And Mansfield Park.
And she actually started Mansfield Park, I think in 1999. So she's had her Regency background as well, but this is her first writing and directing effort. And that was the question for her, which is asked at the very beginning of the film by Charlotte, is how could this woman, this young woman who had led a very sheltered life and be so introverted, have written a novel like Wuthering Heights?
You know, and I don't blame it. There is a suggestion that she stole it from somewhere. Now, there wasn't anywhere to steal it from.
No, I mean...
But it is that good.
Yes.
And we've always felt that writers must be pulling from their background and from the ambience and all this. You know, how could she possibly just bring this out of her imagination? Incredible.
Well, and just to set the stage, and I think the film does an interesting job of having Wuthering Heights bleed into the film in terms of it's set on the Yorkshire moors. It's a very remote parish where her family has been, taken by their father and raised. There's not a lot of society around them, and
we always have the pub.
Well, you always have the pub. There's always a pub. But given that their father is a pastor,
tight. Really tight.
And
Patrick Bronte.
Yes, and that they had 6 children. Mrs. Bronte dies young. Before we joined this story of Emily's imagined life, 2 of the 2 older children, both daughters, have passed away, and so now there's 4. Children.
And you mentioned Charlotte. We see very little of Charlotte in this film, I think, of the kind. And she's crusty. She's very tough on her sister.
She's very tough, and Anne who's the youngest of the children, is also in the film, and she's more of a peacemaker, if you will.
Sure.
She's friends with everybody. And then we have the brother Branwell,
Oh, Branwell.
who's portrayed as a ne'er-do-well, and the father is constantly displeased. But in addition to Charlotte, one of the problems I had with the script is that none of these characters do you develop any type of empathy with, because they're all very crusty or portrayed at their worst, which I know is poetic license / artistic
Sure,
license,
yeah.
if you will. But in terms of telling a fantasized story about Emily's life and what it could have been like, it was hard for me to feel invested in the story because I didn't feel like any of the characters were very sympathetic at all.
And for me, it was just too episodic. You couldn't what you wanted, I couldn't get either, because I really wanted more of them. I mean, why is it that I always have to raise my eyebrows at a character like Branwell? God, come on, man. I realize this is true. He drank himself to. He had artistic possibilities, and he didn't follow through.
That is true, but again, like what I think was missing, and that was in their lives in reality, was that they certainly touch on in the film that the three sisters, to entertain themselves, and you can see where their creativity came from, they used to tell each other stories and build on each other's aspects of the stories. They created these fantasy worlds with fantasy languages and would write them down and go back and forth. And Branwell was actually a part of that, but they don't portray that in the film at all. He's off doing his own education and artistic thing.
What they do, Mary, is suggest an incestuous possibility. And of course, that's far-fetched. But I began watching it more and more, and I thought O'Connor was pushing that just a bit.
Yeah, Emily is portrayed as being extremely close to her brother.
Yeah.
And her brother being jealous of her, not only talent, but this other relationship with the curate at her father's parish that she starts to develop a relationship with, which again there's no evidence that existed in real life, but he's appointed as her tutor. He's very straight-laced, but his passion for her starts to creep in, and her passion for him creeps in.
And here you can see the obvious connection with Heathcliff.
Yes.
It's one of the cases where, that's where she gets it.
Right.
If she had a passionate affair, she might have picked, but he was hardly as deranged as Heathcliff, as I remember Heathcliff.
Heathcliff, in fairness, is always portrayed as deranged, but if you think about, Heathcliff was a foundling and was taken in by this wealthy family and was raised in a world that he wasn't familiar with, but he was never allowed in. He was still viewed as the foundling, so he had to go out and make his own way, but he had this passionate love for Catherine, and their love, for those of you who haven't read Wuthering Heights, their love transcends everything, even death. So
it is a hot mess, that love.
It is a hot mess, but there are shades that I thought it was interestingly portrayed, that there are shades of Wuthering Heights woven in, not only to the cinematography, which was shot on location at the Yorkshire
Have you ever
Moors.
been there?
I have not.
I have walked the moors, and I walked hoping just to catch the spirit of these ladies.
Well, you could have visited their parish and visited their
I
graves.
did.
You did?
Yeah.
And you saw the museum where they show their writing?
I saw the whole thing,
Wow.
and I got the feel of the loneliness, and I tried to catch her very romantic notion about the moors, and apparently where she got a lot of her inspiration. And it is very desolate beyond belief. I mean, you look far, I love how I think they had a tree that they were hiding under.
Well, it's a stretch to call that a tree.
I know, right? Because there's no protection, and I don't remember seeing a tree on that moor. But boy, Yeah, again, I am so just amazed that not only one, but two prominent novelists coming from the same family.
Well, three actually. Anne was published.
Yeah.
It's interesting. One of the things I would recommend if you do see the film is suspend your knowledge if you have a significant knowledge of the Bronte sisters, because
Yes.
a lot of the facts are disregarded or put it in incorrect order. For example, you're led to believe that Wuthering Heights was the first novel published by any of the sisters, when in fact Jane Eyre by Charlotte was the first one published. The second one published was Agnes Grey by Anne.
Right.
The third one published was Wuthering
Right,
Heights
yeah.
by Emily.
Yeah, they really almost try to reverse it.
They do, and they try, and in this case they imagine that the publishing of Wuthering Heights and then subsequently Emily's death, because she died at 30 and this is the only novel that was ever published.
All right, Mary Yerina, fortunately, we do have the podcast Double Take.
We do.
Because I can already feel the urgency to hear more about what you have to say concerning this.
You cut me off pretty hard there,
I
John.
I did, and I'm going to ask you to give your advice to our audience before we sign off and go into Double Take.
Well, my advice would be that if you need your Regency film fix, this is a fine film to attend. However, I would not recommend it as one of the best Regency era films ever made.
Yeah, okay, it's pretty dark, but if you're like me and you love that kind of thing, it's good. I don't know about Bob.
Bob did not even want to see this, so I was on my own.